people who go on strict diets, they regain the weight plus more. So if you're thinking, oh, the less I eat, the more weight I'll lose, it's absolutely false. Maybe you'll lose weight in the short term, but in the long run, it'll come back to bite you.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, who watches The Secret at least once a year, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 25 of the Running for Real podcast. I am so excited and honored that you are here. Thank you so much for joining me. So last week we talked to Danny Dreyer. He has found a connection between Tai Chi and running. Yes, those two together. And he's just made running really simple. And so if running isn't enjoyable or comfortable for you, which it hasn't been for me these past few months, you need to make a change. I needed to make a change. And Chi Running has done just that. You know, it's really interesting. And if you missed it, make sure you go back and check that out. Now, today we have an interview with Nancy Clark, who is a registered dietitian, probably one of the best known registered dietitians in the US, if not the world, especially when it comes to sports nutrition. Her sports nutrition guidebook has sold over 600,000 copies, so doing pretty well there. And, you know, I had her on Run to the Top previously, but this time I wanted to get more personal. I started working with Nancy after I stopped running when I wanted to get my cycle back. And I realized a pretty hard truth when I was working with her. And you're going to learn what that was. And you're going to be a little bit shocked by it as well, because I definitely was caught off guard. And I think she has a lot of great advice here. And you're not going to believe how many people are under fueling. And yes, I know if you're nodding your head saying, well, that's not me. You know, I'm overweight. I feel like I'm the opposite. I'm too big. Well, this is a must listen. And hopefully it will encourage you to make some changes that will actually make you feel better, look better, and just everything about things will change, because that's definitely how I felt when I approached what Nancy said and really made a go of this. So I'm hoping it doesn't resonate with you, but I'm hoping you find it interesting. But if it does resonate with you, listen to what she has to say, because it really is great advice, and I can't tell you how much better I feel. All right, so after a quick word from V, we'll be right to the episode. Technology has come a long way, and later in the show, you're going to get to meet one of the best advances for running I've ever seen, and you're going to love her. If you have to train on your own a lot, like I did, V will be just what you need. Check out getvi.com for more information. Nancy, thank you so much for joining me on the Running for Real podcast. I did have you on Run to the Top, but this is something completely different, and our relationship is a little bit different now. So thank you so much for joining me. I know we're going to pick up a lot from this. It's great to have you here.
Well, thank you, Tina, for inviting me. It's an honor.
Oh, well, thank you. I know that a lot of people in the running world know of you, have read your books, have your books. I will be putting links in the show notes for anyone listening if you are interested in purchasing one of Nancy's books afterwards. So make sure that you check that out afterwards if you are interested. But so I did mention I had you on my previous podcast, but maybe you could tell us, for those who don't know, who have never heard of you, or maybe, you know, they're just entering the running world. Who is Nancy Clark?
Well, Nancy Clark is a sports nutritionist, a mother, a wife, a dog owner, a gardener, a bicycle commuter. I'm many different people. And I live in the Boston area, where I have a private practice with sports nutrition, where I help a lot of runners and people who want help winning with good nutrition and finding peace with food and fueling their body the best that they can, so that they can get the most out of their workouts.
Mm-hmm. And for those listening who are thinking, oh, you know, you said about performing, and you know, we're going to go on to talk about you working with me. Do you just work with higher level runners, or do you work with runners across the board? If someone is in that Boston area, which obviously is a big runner area.
I work with all levels of people. A lot of novice marathoners that are running for team and training doing their first marathon. I work with like ordinary mortals. So it's the whole spectrum.
Okay.
High school athletes, college athletes, moms that just had babies, people that have gotten out of shape and want to get back in shape, and people that are training for the Olympics. Mm-hmm. So it matters not.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's great. Thank you for clearing that up. So, you and I have been working together, I think, about 4 months now, maybe. Mm-hmm. You reached out to me initially when my amenorrhea story went live, and, you offered your help and said, if you need anything, I'm here for you. And, if I wanted to work with you, then I could. And at the time, initially I was kind of a bit resistant. I don't know if you picked up on that, but I was a bit like, I don't need help. Come on, I know what I'm doing. I have my nutrition perfectly under control. And, I thought it through, and I thought, this is a good opportunity. I knew you were the best in the business. And I thought, what, I can do this. And especially with us being able to do it from afar, over the phone, it kind of seemed like something like, what do I have to lose? It can only help me. So I turned around to the idea, I guess, after thinking it through. But for someone listening who might be in a situation kind of like where I was, where they say, I have a friend who's a nutritionist, or I have a friend who has a nutrition certification, and they looked at my food log and it said everything was fine. So I don't need to work with a dietitian. What's the difference? What would you like to say about that? Just what is the power of, working with a registered dietitian?
A registered dietitian has a lot of professional background. We have education so that anyone can say, I'm a nutritionist because I love to eat and cook and I've read all about it. But only a registered dietitian has had like 4 years of undergraduate work in learning about nutrition and food, has done an internship in dietetics, probably has gone on to get a master's in it. So there's a lot of professional expertise that often is missing in people that get all their nutrition knowledge from the web or whatever. And I think what's important for the audience to understand is that dietitians don't make people feel ashamed or point their finger and go, you're eating that? Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how you mentioned that you were sort of like resistant to like getting help. And I know that so many people have that same resistance. I mean, it's one of the reasons why dietitians are the best kept secret, is that there are people that just miss out on this opportunity to learn not so much what they should be doing, because they probably know what they should be doing, but why it is that they're not eating what they should eat. It's more the looking at what's going on behind the scenes, because mm-hmm. it's not rocket science of how to eat well, but it's why aren't you eating the way that really supports your life as an athlete, mm-hmm. or would really help you run better or be healthier? And so I'm sort of curious. I feel like interviewing you is like, can you pinpoint what your resistance was? Was it a shame or embarrassment or?
I think part of it was like pride, because I felt like I prided myself on knowing enough about it. I had read about it. I'd taken classes in school, and I think it was, now I think about it, it's kind of maybe more of a thing of like, well, of course I know how to eat. I mean, duh. Like you can read up on, health, how to eat healthy. And like you said, you can read information on how to eat healthy, but looking back at it now, and we're going to go into my story a bit more and use me as an example here, but looking back, I can see that I still had all the concepts correct. I just didn't quite have them tweaked to what I needed. So I think that maybe was the case, that like you said, we all know how to eat healthy, but it's putting it into practice for a way that is suitable for us. So I could definitely see that. And, admitting you need help for eating, it just kind of, I guess it's maybe where having a running coach was 10 years ago, where people would say, why do you need a running coach? You just go out there and run. Like, what does that mean? So, maybe it's that kind of situation. Like it seems initially, before you think it through, it seems like something that, why would I possibly need help with when it's so, obvious?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's the pride, it's shame, it's embarrassment, it's all sorts of things. But my message to your listeners is that, dietitians are the best kept secret, and you might want to reach out to, someone in your local area and the goal is to help you find peace with food and also to be the best runner that you can be.
Mm-hmm. And I can attest to this too. Like like we've just said, before I thought, I have friends who are nutritionists. I spoke to probably 5 to 6 different people that had them look at food logs. I'd assessed my food logs. I'd added it all up. It seemed like it was fine. And I, at the time, thought, what could really be that different? But I can now say that what Nancy is saying is true. Like, it really does make a huge difference. And, let's dive into that a bit more. So when we dived into my diet, I want you to tell me in a minute the things that you noticed. But one thing that stuck out to me was once you and I started talking, a lot of the little, I guess, symptoms that I'd had over the years were very apparent, but I had always chalked them down to different things. So, for example, I was cold often, but it's easy enough to say, well, I have bad circulation that runs in my family. I had sugar cravings. Well, I've always loved sweets since I was a child, so that's no different. Or I have trouble sleeping. Well, I've never really been a good sleeper. So there's always ways you can write those off. But once we started to look into it, more and more of these things that you would ask me about issues I had all seem to be related to this. So can you tell us, maybe if you can remember well enough, what you found when it came to looking at my diet, just as an example for other people that they might not expect?
Well, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head that there's always reasons, cold, tired, moody, unable to focus or concentrate, spending too much time thinking about food. Those are all signs that you're hungry and your body is requesting more fuel. If you aren't eating enough, your body works hard to maintain heat in the core, but your hands and feet are just always cold. It's like, I have Raynaud's disease. Well, it's amazing the number of people that don't have Raynaud's disease. They're just under eating. And when they start eating more, they have more fuel to keep their hands and feet warm. It's interesting the number of people that, love watching the Food Channel. And as somebody said, it's like, watching the Food Channel is like pornography for a person with an eating disorder. Yeah, or reading recipes, cooking and giving it away to others. These are all really standard traits of people that are under eating. And what I sort of ask my clients is, what % of your time do you spend thinking about food? And when the answer is 99% or way too much, or I'm embarrassed to say, then it's a sign that they're really significantly under eating.
What about, can I just pause you with that? What if, like in my case, for example, I wouldn't have said I was thinking about food all the time, but I would say that I'd finish one meal and kind of already be looking forward to the next meal. Like, I can't wait to have dinner because it's going to be so good. Is that the same kind of thing, or are you talking about something different here?
Yeah, no, I would say that's the same kind of thing. So the question is, did you stop eating because you thought you should, or because your body was content? And it sounds like, well, I ate the food that was on my plate, so I guess I've eaten my meal, and now I can't wait for the next one. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you were content and had stopped eating just because your body had had the right amount of fuel, you would have gotten on with your day and wouldn't have to be thinking about, what's the next meal?
Mm-hmm. So then what if someone listening to this says, yeah, but I just love food. I just love to eat. I really enjoy eating.
Well, we all should love eating. Food should be one of life's pleasures. But when it's obsessive, it's because there's this undercurrent of hunger. I want more fuel that is really driving that love of eating. But yeah, I mean, I'm a big advocate of eating and loving food. That's not a problem, but it's the obsessiveness and the obsessions with it. Yeah.
Okay. And then so, we're going to go on to talk about some of the steps I took and some of the things that we used to uncover what was going wrong with me. But let's say in that example, you just used someone obsessing over food. What if someone listening is thinking, well, I'm not obsessing over food. I'm not thinking about it all the time. Maybe they see themselves as a very toned down version of what you're saying. Yeah, my fingers and hands are cold. Yeah, I have sugar cravings all the time, and I, look forward to food and I might think about food other times, but I'm not obsessed with it. What about those people? Are you saying that they still have something to kind of work on? Is it, and I can, spoiler alert, I've kind of got to the point now where now I am eating the way that I guess I should be eating. I don't get thinking in that way of like, oh, I can't wait for dinner. Like if I'm going out for a meal and I know it's going to be a really nice meal, but it's not like, oh, I can't wait to eat that, that couscous and vegetables or something like it. It's not the same. Would you say for someone who doesn't feel it quite to the extreme that you were saying there, this is still something they have to work on if you are feeling hungry, if you are thinking about food a lot, that is your body's way of saying, I need more?
Yeah, the chances are, yes. I'd also look at sweet cravings. People don't inherently have a sweet tooth, but when they get too hungry, the body wants quick energy. It wants sugar. It wants sweets. And so I look at the whole constellation, and nutrition advice really needs to be given out one-on-one. So when we're talking to the generalities, people have to pick and choose what applies to them and what doesn't. But if there's sweet cravings and cold hands and feet and thinking about the next meal or whatever, it just sort of adds up to paint a picture of, oh, I think that body needs a little bit more fuel. And there are many people that think that they eat plenty. And if you're eating clean, eating healthy, sometimes you eat a lot of food and say, oh, I eat a lot. How could I be hungry or underfed? Yeah, but what are you eating? I mean, a whole head of lettuce is maybe 60 calories, and, the whole container of fat-free yogurt is maybe 80 calories. And so, I mean, you can eat lots, but if it's just not very energy dense and low in calories, then you might perceive yourself as being a big eater when the reality is your body still needs more fuel.
Yeah, and that I definitely want to go into this more because that's something I think I was definitely had fallen into, not necessarily a clean diet, but, we'll kind of talk about my situation that we said about the too healthy on one end and then the very unhealthy on the other end. But before we go into that, a lack of periods is one way of showing that something else is going on. But maybe you could give us some other examples before we go on to that about the steps we started taking. What are some other ways runners can learn that they're not taking in enough fuel? You've mentioned the cold, you've mentioned sugar cravings and, a lack of periods. What other things might someone notice, maybe for a guy or just for someone who isn't really having any of those issues you mentioned so far?
Yeah, lack of sexual drive can be a part of it. Low energy, putting all of your energy into running, and then the rest of the day just kind of sitting and recovering and saying, oh, I'm so tired because I ran. If you're just dead at the end of the day, it's like, oh, I'm so tired because I had a busy day at work. It's like, yeah, no, everybody gets tired at the end of the day, but to be just totally exhausted is a sign that you need more fuel. Sometimes people, their hair falls out.
Yeah, I have heard of that.
Ooh, that's not so good. And so that there can be extremes, but I think it sort of gets summarized in tired, cold, hungry, not sleeping, thinking too much about food, looking at recipes, fascinated by food, cooking, but giving it to others, not eating it yourself, cold hands and feet, dreading winter. Those are really the key symptoms.
Okay.
Are there others that you're thinking about?
No, I mean, those were the primary ones, and I just wanted to make sure there weren't any others that weren't necessarily applicable to what you and I talked about, but maybe other people might experience that might be warning signs to them. But I think you've kind of said a lot of them. And just a funny side note for anyone listening, last week when Nancy and I talked, I said to her that usually around this time of year, I'm dreading the winter coming, and I'm thinking, oh no, like it's coming again, like trying to cling on to every last day of summer. Whereas now I get so overheated, and part of that is because I'm pregnant, but part of it is just I get so overheated that I'm kind of looking forward to the cooler weather when I can actually feel a little bit cooler rather than just feeling hot all the time. So Actually, maybe you could kind of tell people what you said to me there about that, about the difference between if you aren't eating enough and how you perceive the summer compared to if you are eating enough and how you perceive the summer.
Yeah, no, my clients that undereat, they love the summer because finally it's their chance to be warm, and they don't mind running in the heat. And I'd love to do a research study sometime of just comparing runners that are well fueled and those that are under fueled, and just their relationship with summer and winter, and which kind of weather they prefer to run in. But I think it would be pretty clear that if you're under fueled, you really much prefer the summer and dread the winter as you did. And it's just amazing, the difference. And that's where I invite listeners that are sort of going, boy, I'm not looking forward to winter either, to be a little bit curious and maybe willing to do a little bit of an experiment to see, what would happen if I ate a little bit more? Maybe would I feel better? Would I not be thinking about food as much? Would I have more energy at the end of the day? And just be curious and experimental.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great advice. And I would definitely recommend people try it. And people are starting to learn right now that I am admitting that I was under fueling as well. And, you said to me to kind of experiment a lot, and we'll talk about the steps I took in a second. But before we go on to that, there's this real disconnect between the images that we see, especially in women, but men too. You see these images of models or runners, and, everything is chiseled and they're thin and they're lean, and, they look like, in theory, the definition of, health and wellness. But people who looked at me before, or someone listening right now, might think, well, I don't look, I'm not that skinny. I don't look like I don't look like someone who is really struggling. I'm perfectly healthy. There's no way this is applicable to me because I'm not that thin. Maybe my BMI is 20, so it's perfectly fine. It's in the normal range. Like, what would you like to say to people like that? Because there is this disconnect, and especially it becomes more difficult for women who need that higher body fat percentage. But for anyone who thinks that it doesn't apply to them, they've got the symptoms, but it surely cannot possibly apply, because how could that be the case?
Yeah, there's something that's called atypical anorexia. And you think of a person with anorexia and you think, skinny, bony looking anorexic. Mm-hmm. But I have clients with anorexia that you would look at them and you would never know that they were restricting food. And that's because they're just too lean for their genetics. And so we have this genetic blueprint that we're all born with. Mm-hmm. And, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. So if you happen to be living in a larger body and you believe that you don't look like a runner, I'd say look at your family and mm-hmm. how do you look compared to the others? Are you leaner than they are? Are you far leaner than they are? And if you're leaner or far leaner and trying to get even leaner yet, it could be that the cost of that is eating like a bird. Mm-hmm. And, when people say, oh, I don't look like a runner. Well, what does a runner look like? What does a dog look like? Mm-hmm. Are there are greyhounds, there are St. Bernards, there's Chihuahuas, there's beagles, there's Labradors, there's English setters. What does a dog look like?
That's so true.
What does a runner look like? They all come in different sizes and shapes. Mm-hmm. And in the dog kingdom, every dog is very proud of their genetics. Mm-hmm. And they would have no interest. That Labrador would have no interest in being a poodle. And the St. Bernard would certainly not want to be a greyhound. And it's unfortunate that in the human kingdom, in the runner kingdom, that the person in the larger body, would just love to be in the smaller body. But, if you're from a solid background of husky people, you're never going to turn into a really petite person mm-hmm. without it having a very high cost. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that cost is sanity and your health.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And, I can say to listeners right now that, this was obviously the case with me. When I look at my family, my immediate family have pretty similar shapes to me right now. But then as I go further out, my mum has 9 brothers and sisters, and most of them have big, heavy frames, and the ones that don't have eating disorders. So that's obviously a good example for you of that situation where the family genetics show bigger bones and bigger body builds, and then the ones that try to escape it have the problem. And then, I was obviously someone with a problem not quite that far gone as some of my aunts and uncles, but still definitely an issue there. And just for someone listening who is thinking about this and thinking, okay, well, that's all well and good, but aren't we supposed to be lean for our races? Isn't that extra weight going to make me more injury prone? And I need to be lean for my race. What would you like to say to people who are trying to find essentially their racing weight?
Well, there was an interesting study that was just done by the military, because right now there are all these women in the military doing combat. It's like, how can they perform compared to the men? Now, clearly, a muscular man will be able to outperform a woman, but yet they found that performance was based more on muscle than on body weight or body fatness. And so if you are a strong woman with more muscle, you have a bigger engine and you can run fast. So there's really no truth to the lightest runner is the best runner. It's the best runner is genetically gifted. The best runner is well rested, well fueled, wisely trained. I mean, there are many, many factors, but if you think, if I could just lose these last 5 pounds, I'd be lighter, I'd be better. Well, what's the cost of losing those last 5 pounds? What will you look like? Will you be far leaner than others in your genetic family? Is it a weight that you can sustain? And do you really have that weight, that excess fat to lose? And that's where you can get guidance from a registered dietitian. And you can have somebody who can not only measure body fat, but have a whole conversation about, let's see pictures of your family and keep everything in perspective. But there's a lot of body image work that needs to be done.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of what you do, isn't it? Is like you said, I completely changed the way that I look at myself, having worked with you, and obviously with me, partly the decision I made to say, I don't care what I look like, I just want my body to be healthy again. So I kind of already made that decision. But I think that is a lot of how you're able to help people, is realizing that there's so much more than the way they look in their bodies.
Yeah, and there are many case studies of people that have gone from undereating to being fully fed, and their bodies have changed. I mean, it's not as though they've gotten fat. They've restored muscle, they've repaired their body, but they've been able to run better. And so it's not a death sentence of, I'll never be a top runner again. It just opens up the doors to being an even better runner. I just look at all these people that are under-fueled, and it's like, man, how much better could they be? And when they start fueling better, you know what? They can be better. And it's not as though people get instantly fat. I mean, but it's trusting the body to be able to, restore itself to its full musculature so that it can perform well.
No, I think that what you just said there is really, really important, because that was the thing for me. As even though I had said, I'll do whatever it takes, it's hard to get over that fear of thinking, even if you are only going to gain a little bit, but you are having some of those symptoms we mentioned earlier, you say, what, I'm going to experiment, like Nancy said. But there is that fear associated with gaining weight, that we are surrounded in this world where we're told, 2 out of 3 people are overweight or whatever. And, there's that fear that you're going to, and I know I had this and I talked to you about it, that I was going to jump from, skinny, lean, fit, whatever, to obese and skip over that entire portion of the population. I would, if I'm eating as much as I can eat, and anytime my body's hungry, I'm eating and I'm gaining weight and it's fine. What's going to stop my body from going, keep wanting to eat more and more? My stomach is going to stretch, and I'm just kind of like, for anyone listening, I know they're worried about this because this is something I definitely thought about, and it's hard to disconnect that. And maybe you can explain it to people. And I know it now from doing it myself that it does level off and you do stop getting as hungry all the time and you find that balance. But what do you want to tell someone who has that fear that they're not going to be able to stop eating?
Yeah, and this is where it's really important just to let go and trust. Trust that your body's not going to instantly get fat on you. Now, when you look at the studies, there have been studies done on people that were semi-starved, and these were conscientious objectors in World War II, and they were able to do an experiment with them, and they cut their food intake in half, and they monitored what happened to them when they were semi-starved. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the experiment, they, monitored them as they came out of this starvation response. And they found that they ate. Like they ate, and they'd be full. And then a half an hour later, they'd want another meal. And their stomach was full, but their body was hungry. And that they consumed, quite a bit of food, but then they got to their natural weight. And some of them overshot a little bit, which is the body's sort of way of saying, well, we've had one famine, we better prepare for another one. Mm-hmm. But then over the course of the time, they return to their natural weight. Mm-hmm. And you see this in people that are recovering from anorexia. Their body, it wants food, and that they can eat an amazing amount of food and restore their body to its natural place. And, sometimes people overshoot a little bit. Sometimes they don't, but they certainly don't get fat. But once you get to your natural weight, your appetite will just drop. And it's amazing. My clients will come in and say, oh, do I have to eat this much? I just don't want it. Whereas before it's like, oh, they were out of food jail mm-hmm. after having lived in food jail for mm-hmm. years. Mm-hmm. But it's scary. It's scary. It's trusting. And the thing is that people that have complicated relationships with food, they like to control it. They control their food and their portions and their appetite and their exercise. And, they just control everything very, very tightly. And then to let go and just kind of follow the body cues. It's not a typical day in their eating, should mm-hmm. I say. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, but you have to remember back to a time when you were a kid mm-hmm. and you ate when you were hungry. You stopped when you were content. Weight wasn't an issue. Energy wasn't an issue. You just ate when you were hungry, stopped when you were content, weighed what you weighed, and none of this was a big deal. Mm-hmm. But it becomes a big deal when you stop eating when you're still hungry. When you try to lose weight, if you go on a diet, people go on a diet, that's an invitation to gain weight because in the long run, that's what happens. So it's just this very complex world that we live in. Mm-hmm. And people think that, weight is a matter of willpower, and it's not. There's a genetic set point. Your body really wants to be at a certain place. And if you just let yourself eat, and stay mindful, does my body need this food? It's like, yeah, I'm still hungry. Mm-hmm. And there are times when people eat when the body doesn't need food. And yes, if you consistently overeat day by day by day, anyone can get fat. But if you listen to your body and just mindfully, does my body need this food? It's like, yeah, it does want more. And then you feed it more. It's like, oh, I feel better now.
Mm-hmm. So can I just, when you were saying about that, you said, maybe you'll overeat. And I know you said to me before that, let's say you do overshoot, you overeat on a big meal. You go out for, a meal with some friends and you have, appetizers, a main, a dessert and a few drinks. And you just go to bed that night feeling so full. You definitely overate, didn't need that much food. You feel uncomfortable. What did you tell me and what do you tell people about what your body will do in that situation?
Yeah, and most people in that situation, when they go to bed, they go, okay, no breakfast tomorrow. Let us leave for lunch. Run in 10 extra miles. I got to punish my body because I overate. And if they were just to simply wake up in the morning and listen to their body to discover, you know what? I don't really want very much breakfast this morning. I think I'll just have, a light bowl of Cheerios, just
but
something to stay on schedule. Still have something. And lunch comes along and it's like, I think I just want some soup today. I'm not really hungry enough for a whole sandwich. And the body will do it naturally if they listen, if they just listen. But instead they take control, then they starve themselves as a punishment for having overeaten. And then the whole vicious cycle starts again. And if you just really stay in touch with your body when you can eat mindfully, there's such freedom in knowing that your body's not going to overeat. It doesn't feel good to stuff yourself. And having said that, it is normal to overeat. Normal eaters overeat. I mean, there's Thanksgiving, there's celebrations with food, there's birthdays. It is normal to overeat, but it's normal to let your body compensate and to trust that your body will compensate for any mistakes that you make in eating. And that's where a lot of people go wrong. They just don't trust their body because they've gone through binges where they've been way too hungry, eaten way too much. And when you undereat, the body wants to overeat. That's physiological. It's like if I were to stick your head underwater, keep it there too long. When you pop up, can you breathe normally? No. You're gasping for the air. And the same thing if you don't have much breakfast, don't have much lunch. Come afternoon, you'll be craving sweets and you can eat that whole thing of cookies very easily. And that's physiological.
Yes. So then for someone listening who is thinking, okay, well, I'm already overweight. If I listen to my body, it would tell me I'm hungry all the time and I just want to keep eating and I'd gain more weight. Can you tell some of the listeners who might be, maybe trying to lose weight, maybe they have an upcoming race and they're thinking, I'm trying to lose a bit of weight here for my race. How does this still apply to them? Just because I think there's so many runners out there who feel like they have to limit, they have to restrict, and they're already overweight. So what you're saying doesn't apply. So what would you like to say to them?
Well, first I'd determine, are you truly over fat according to your genetics? Do you really have lots of flab to lose? And the only time to lose weight is at nighttime when you're sleeping. So you always want to surround your workout with food. You want to fuel up and refuel. And it's at the end of the day, before you go to bed, when you're about to reach for some ice cream or a cookie or something, that's when you really want to ask yourself, would I rather be leaner or would I rather eat more? And the goal is to wake up ready for breakfast. And if you wake up ready for breakfast, then you can go, aha, I didn't overeat last night. I lost weight when I was sleeping. So that for people who want to lose weight, you fuel by day and diet by night. And by dieting, it's just chipping away a couple hundred calories. We know that people who go on strict diets, they regain the weight plus more. So if you're thinking, the less I eat, the more weight I'll lose, it's absolutely false. Maybe you'll lose weight in the short term, but in the long run, it'll come back to bite you. There's a diet backlash, which is why, one of the reasons why 2/3 of Americans are overweight or obese, because they've been on diets. If diets worked, everybody in America would be thin. That's not the case. Dieting is the problem. So just think, eat a little bit less at the end of the day, just chip away, or just appreciate your body for what it is. Maybe your body's good enough.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Thank you. And I think, what Nancy's saying here is that this same principles, everything she's saying applies regardless of what weight you are, regardless of whether you're underweight, overweight. The same thing comes down to, are you listening to your body? I can safely admit now that I was not listening to my body. I did find myself getting back from a run. I'd eat what I thought was, and it was probably a pretty big breakfast, but then I would be hungry again 2 hours later. And I'd think, I cannot possibly be hungry again. And I'd make myself wait another hour. but really I should have just eaten then. And I want to kind of talk about that now. So when I started working with you, I kind of went through what I was eating. You kind of said to me that you wanted me to break it down into 600 calories every 4 hours. Now, at this time, I was sedentary. I wasn't doing any exercise. So that was just, basically living. And, had I been running, or anyone who's listening who is running, they're burning even more. So, maybe you could kind of explain just how someone can figure out how much they should be eating if they want like that ballpark, or just to kind of do that experiment like where I did 600 every 4 hours, which was actually quite difficult when I would get up at 6 a.m., eat 600 calories, which is quite a lot. And then at 10 o'clock, have another 600, at 2 o'clock, another 600, and 6 o'clock, another 600. That was kind of eye-opening for me, but maybe for someone listening, how can they kind of learn what to experiment with for themselves?
Well, this is where working with a dietitian can really help figure out energy needs. But, a quick and dirty formula is weight times 10 is what you need just to lie in bed and breathe and do nothing. So if you weigh 140, you need 1,400 calories just to breathe. So that's 2 pieces of pizza for breakfast, 2 for lunch, 2 for dinner, to do nothing. And then you need more for your daily coming and going. And if you're moderately active during the day, up and around, going to work, up and downstairs, moving around, you add about half of your resting metabolic rate. So that could be half of 1,400 is 700, so that's 2,100. And then if you go and run 3 miles, that's 2,400 calories there. Mm-hmm. And then, eating should be a timeline, and you get a food bucket every 4 hours. So you said that you stuffed in 600 calories for breakfast. You could also have had 400 calories for the first part of your breakfast, and then a couple of hours later had another 200. Mm-hmm. So a food bucket can last for 4 hours. But the goal is to front load. And for those of you that are listening that are going, oh no, my body's different from everybody else's, I could never eat that much. It's like, no, there's a possibility you could eat that much. And so what you want to do is really focus on the first 3 buckets: breakfast, first lunch, second lunch, and then dinner. If you just aren't hungry, have a lighter dinner. But dinner's the escape hatch.
And I will say to anyone listening that I did do what Nancy said. And yes, it does seem like a lot, especially to those of you like my husband, who is not a big eater in the morning. But I know I understand what you're saying when people say that. But I did find when I got to the evening, I would have such a small portion at dinner compared to what I was eating before, because I just wasn't hungry. And even the desserts started to go away because I just couldn't fit them in. I just didn't want them anymore. I started craving them less. So I will say what Nancy is saying, by front loading, it makes a huge difference. It seems scary to have, in my case, for example, 1,200 calories by lunchtime. And for you, if you're running, it's even more, but it really, really will make a huge difference and make you less likely to do those binges. So sorry, Nancy, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's good. And what you're saying, Tina, is that when you got to dinner time, you weren't as hungry. That's because you had all those dessert calories earlier in the day in the form of real quality food. Mm-hmm. And people say, oh, but I love my dessert. Okay, well, have your dessert in the afternoon then. But don't think you have to have dessert at the end of the day and hold off for it. Mm-hmm. But the psychology of it all is like, oh, but I want a big dinner at the end of the day to reward myself. It's like, you know what? If you eat more during the day, you feel better. You don't need to reward yourself at night because you've got energy to go and do something else. Mm-hmm. You have this thing called evening. And it's not as though you need a reward for having survived the day. You're just ready to keep on partying, and have more energy to enjoy life.
That's helpful. And it really does make a difference. And, if you are going out for a meal, I know that was one of my concerns with you was, oh, well, I know I'm going out for a meal this evening. And, what if, I'm not that hungry, but you can, there are going to be days where that happens. And, you can still kind of do this, or even if you do overeat, like Nancy said, you will be slightly less hungry the next day. So it will balance itself out. But, part of the problem I think here is, you mentioned just there about having dessert earlier in the day. And, that's what I kind of started doing. I think around 4 p.m. was my like dessert meal, or whenever it was, I can't remember, sometime in the afternoon. But, we're constantly being told you need to eat healthy. You need to get 8 to 10 servings of fruits and vegetables. But you mentioned earlier that a lot of people that do that, it's too, you're not getting enough calories because you can't, and I was doing this, I can't eat enough sweet potatoes and, carrots and parsnips and things like that to possibly get the calories in. So how do we kind of balance this eat healthy? And I want you to explain that you don't believe in good foods or bad, but how can people get these calories in when they're supposed to be trying to eat healthy, quote unquote?
Well, like you said, there's not a good food or a bad food. There's a balanced diet and an unbalanced diet. Mm-hmm. And dessert can fit into a balanced diet. So if you've got 4 meals a day and 2,400 calories, you can get all the nutrients you need in 12 to 1,500 calories. So, theoretically, you could have, 1,000 calories of whatever and still be well nourished. Would that be optimal in terms of investing in your health? No, but, we got to keep the perspective here. So you don't have to have a perfect diet to have an excellent diet. And I know of many people that have a perfect diet and it is very unbalanced. Mm-hmm. It is very unhealthy. And so it's fine to have a diet that's 85 to 90% quality foods, 10 to 15% whatever. And some days whatever is blueberries, and some days it's blueberry pie. So it's fine to have, for second lunch, with my family, I have a sister who loves to bake, and she'll make these pies and say, she said, we can have pie for dessert. I go, no, let's have pie for second lunch. Let's have pie at 4 p.m. Mm-hmm. She goes, but it'll ruin our appetite for dinner. It's like, hey, that's okay. Mm-hmm. So come dinner, you have chicken and vegetables instead of chicken and rice and vegetables and then dessert, It all balances out.
No, I think that's refreshing to hear you say that as well, because I think, as you mentioned at the beginning, people are so afraid that registered dietitians are going to look at the diet and be like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. But it's not necessarily about that. And there aren't foods that you can never eat because, there's things you probably shouldn't have because of the ingredients that are in them. But, it's not. You don't have to eat that perfect clean diet. In fact, like you said, it's not good to do it because usually that means there's something bigger going on there. Anything else you would like to add just before we kind of wrap up here with the questions for you about this?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to where we started, where it's the nutritionists, in quotes, that are the ones that will shame you and make you feel guilty if you eat a cookie, whereas the registered dietitians, we'll look at the big picture and help you find a food plan that's livable, sustainable, nourishes your body, nourishes your soul. And it ends up having food be one of life's pleasures. And I just think that there's too much emphasis these days on everything being healthy. And it's like, no, let's be balanced. Let's have enjoyable foods. There is a place for fun food. There is a place for, quality foods, nutrient-rich foods. But we just have to find the balance. And when you eat enough of good food earlier in the day, the treats will be less important to you. And you'll find that you actually feel better when you eat better. And you feel better about yourself. And that's what I hear you say, Tina, that you're feeling really good about yourself and your good changes and your good energy and your new baby.
Yep. No, exactly. And, I cannot thank you enough for all that you've done for me, Nancy. And to anyone listening, this has completely changed the way that I think about myself, the way that I think about, my body, other people's body, the way I'm going to, teach my child to look at themselves. Like it's made such a huge difference to me. And I cannot emphasize enough how important it was to speak to Nancy. And of all the things that especially if you have amenorrhea, of all the things that you can do, speaking to a registered dietitian should be number one on your list. So Nancy, someone who does want to work with you, tell us what they can do. Are you taking clients? What's the situation right now for someone who's interested?
Well, there's a whole network of sports dietitians around the country. And if you go to the website, scandpg.org, SCAN is a sports and cardiovascular nutrition dietary practice group. So scandpg.org. Scroll down to the bottom of the homepage. You'll see find a SCAN dietitian, find a SCAN RD. And you can put in your zip code, and you'll find people near you that really understand runners. They understand amenorrhea. They understand complicated relationships with food and balancing food and exercise. So to work with somebody local is always the best. Mm-hmm. If you're in the Boston area, I'd be glad to help you out. And you can go to my website, which is nancyclarkrd.com. And I also have very strong chapters on weight, body image, eating going awry in my sports nutrition guidebook, which is Nancy Clark's Sports Nutrition Guidebook, available either on my website or at Amazon.com at your local library.
I'll put plenty of links in the show notes for all those things you mentioned, so anyone can go get them easily enough as well.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Before we get on to the Running for Real Final Four, I have been asking my guests to ask a question. I don't think I warned you about this because I don't want people to be too prepared. If you were to go up to get an Oscar or maybe a dietitian's award or something, who would you thank in your speech?
Who would I thank in my speech? I would probably thank my advisor at graduate school, Dr. Beverly Bullen, who was one of the pioneers in sports nutrition. And she just believed in me and believed that there is a space for sports nutrition, for sports nutritionists at a time when it was very new. And people looked at me like I was crazy. What are you going to do? Like cook spaghetti for runners? It's like, no, I do a lot more than that.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I'm sure that means so much to her to hear you say that. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right. We are just going to take a moment to thank our sponsor, and we will be back with the Running for Real 4. Catching up with friends on a run is one of the best feelings a runner can experience. The miles fly by, you feel good, and it just becomes so much easier to keep going. They push you to be better, and you push them to be better. But for most of us, those runs are few and far between. So how do you stay motivated when it's just you and your thoughts? Wouldn't it be nice to have someone alongside you, pushing you when you need it most? Well, running on your own can be tough to stay motivated, and I'm excited to introduce to you a new friend of mine, someone I know you're going to love, V. V is the coach in your ear, and she doesn't talk all stiff like a robot, but she talks like a real person. She'll give you advice, let you know how you're doing, and actually talk to you like a friend would, in an encouraging way, but still pushing you to do your best, not letting you off the hook when the going gets tough. But she also knows everything about you, so won't let you overtrain yourself either, which I know many of us are guilty of. You can find out more and enter to win your very own V at getv.com/runningforreal. That's getvi.com/running4real. All right, Nancy, just 4 more questions for you. I'm going to say 3 more questions. I'm going to skip over the unique nutrition tip, unless you have anything that you're dying to tell us. I think you've given us more than enough nutrition advice in this episode. So maybe we could start with a running for real moment.
A running for real moment is when I realized that if I just show up at a race, when you get to be older and older, it's easier to place.
Yep.
And so in my hometown, my little hometown, I'm doing pretty well.
That's good.
But I think I'll stay away from the major races.
Hey, that's a good way.
Good about food groups.
Keep building that confidence as well. Okay, what about a high moment for you and why it meant so much? That can either be in a running one, or it can be something in your career as a RD.
Well, I think a high moment is just when I see my sports nutrition guidebook and how it's sold, more than 600,000 copies. I mean, that is just something that I'm truly proud of, because it's really an organic growth. It wasn't, the sales haven't come through tons of, media companies and PR people that have made that happen. It's just runners telling runners and dietitians telling dietitians that this book has a lot of good information that has helped a lot of people. So I just take great pride in that. I mean, and I take great pride in my kids as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those are the things that keep me going.
No, that's wonderful. And I had a copy of your book before I even knew of you or anything. So yeah, it's sitting in our bookshelf as well. So thank you for that. And to anyone listening, again, I will put links in the show notes. Definitely recommend those books. All right, finally, Nancy, what do you tell yourself when you're standing on the start line of a race?
I remember the words of Patty Catalano, who's now Patty Catalano Dillon, and she said that she'd always ask herself, could I hurt more? And so at the start line, I'm not hurting yet, but I remember that. It's like, could I hurt more? Could I run harder? And generally the answer is, yeah, I could.
Okay, that's good advice. All right, and finally, I asked my guests to send a power pose, a way that you would stand to build your confidence, to stand on the start line, or maybe before you were going to go do a big presentation and talk. Will you send us a photo of you in your power pose?
I'll have to think on that one.
Okay.
Figure out what it would be. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Nancy, so much for this talk. This has been great. I know people are going to get so much out of it. Thank you for your help with me, and I hope that you can continue to help other runners in the future.
And that's what would nourish my soul. Thanks, Tina, for this opportunity.
So what she said completely spun my nutritional thinking on its head, but I feel so much better. And of course, I'm pregnant. So something she did definitely helped, but I really think a lot of you could benefit from this as well. So make sure you listen to what she said and really try and see someone if you feel like anything she talked about today resonated with you. You can find everything we talked about, including that link on how to find an RD near you at tinamuir.com/episode 25. I want to thank you for listening today. I appreciate it so much. And I hope you will subscribe to the podcast if you have not already, so it goes directly to your podcast player or your phone or your iPad or whoever you listen to this. So it goes immediately there upon release. You don't have to go looking for it. You don't have to forget about it. You can delete it if you want to, but subscribing definitely is the way forward. So thank you so much for doing that. So next week, we're going to be talking to Christy Ashwandon, who is a sports journalist with just about every accolade someone could have to their name. But we talk about some hard topics, including coaches abusing athletes, doping, and a lot more. So you don't want to miss out on that one because it's really something unique and a bit controversial in a lot of ways, but definitely very interesting. I hope you have a great week, and I'll hear from you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.